Hello and welcome back to Travel Market Life. I'm Ryan Haynes, your host, where we're looking at the developments and changes that are happening within the travel market. Today, we're going to have a close look at rail. What does that mean for the recovery? What investments need to be made within the rail infrastructure and make it available more digitally for travelers worldwide? What will be the impact on pricing? And how should travel providers consider integrating rail within their travel offerings? Joining me is a specialist in rail, Udi Shaurir, the founder and CEO of Save a Train. Hi there, Udi. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very much looking forward to the next coming weeks and months as we get out and about again on our travels. And you must be too, since
I'm on the same side as you.
and particularly for someone who runs a company that is very much needing this international travel to start happening. I mean, you're a relatively new business, aren't you, within rail? Do you want to tell us a little bit about Save a Train?
So 5 years in dog's life is actually 35 years. So I'm not sure how small is how short life is Save a Train. However, we did start in January 2016. So we're not in business the same years as IBM, but since the 21st century, this is actually long. We've been, this past year have been, I can't say remarkable because I've been into isolation twice. The business didn't see much sales. However, it was extremely good for business because now everybody wants trains. Everybody it was in the past you needed to convince. Now you need time to answer emails.
Okay, so let's look at this then. What is the role of rail travel in recovery? Why have you got such interest in rail and your product right now?
And it has several legs. So the first leg, I would say, it's the climate focus. So once you speak about a specific thing, a lot of time, it gets into people's heads. So there was a year when everybody were talking about Greta. Now Biden, his second name is Biden the Train Man. Okay, America is getting back into the Paris Treaty, so you expect to see it more. Then there is the leg of countries bailing out airlines, but this came with strings attached. They canceled routes for flights. So in France, you're not allowed to fly to anywhere where the TGV, the official, not official, but the large railway company in France, if it gets within 2.5 hours. No more flights inside Austria. Thales has taken the route from Brussels Zeventem Airport to Amsterdam instead of flights. Rome to Milan, which started long before everyone else, you don't get to see flights on that route. And then there is the comfortability, and not a lot of people would agree to me, but I welcome any confrontation on that front. Rail is cheaper than air if you calculate your time and baggage costs, and also the price that you commute to and from the airport.
Yeah, I mean, I in some respects, I would sort of agree with that. I think that international rail travel seems to be a lot cheaper than travel here in the UK. I find train travel in the UK incredibly expensive, although there's a lot of, price differentiation. And we're going to talk about pricing in a moment. But particularly with recovery, I mean, there's been a lot of investment in the rail infrastructure, particularly in Spain, France, and Germany in recent years. And as you say, Biden's just announced greater investment in a rail network in the USA, which traditionally really hasn't had any investment in it. I mean, I remember taking a railway trip from San Francisco to Los Angeles one time, and oh my God, it was a 12-hour journey that was only a 3-hour drive. So there's obviously a lot of improvements.
San Francisco to LA is still 12 hours drive.
Is it? Well, then I think I would have been more comfortable in the car than on this train. But nonetheless,
Wales, that's for sure.
And and with a lot of high-speed railway networks, it's making it more appealing, isn't it? It's shortened the time that it takes for people to travel to these destinations. So, do you think that this transition is going to be a longer-term change because of this consideration of price, sustainability, and accessibility?
Yes, unfortunately, it's a long change, and I'll explain. So building infrastructure is never a 5 days project. However, take a look, let's compare the UK to the US to make things simple. Highway wise, you're in the 1980s and they are like in 2100 compared to you. Rail wise is just vice versa. However, there is I remember for my bachelor, one of the few things that I remember from my bachelor degree is one of the largest, if not the largest spend of a government is on infrastructure. That's never going to change. It has benefits because it creates employment. It has benefits because it makes movement better. It actually should reduce housing costs because you can travel from outside the city into the larger city within a much shorter time. So each government has to choose what it wants to focus on. Europe is super progressed in rail, super. Like it's on par with China, but now China 10 years ago was the US, okay? And China will bypass Europe within the next couple of years, and within 15 years, it will have triple the size of rail network that Europe has. But take high speed and regional train, both are basically almost the same, but it's different technologies. So you can't make a 3G mobile phone instantly 4G. You have to buy a new phone in order to make it work on the new connectivity. Same goes for rail. You have to fix the rail tracks. You have to fix the electricity. You have to bring locomotives that actually work faster. This takes time, unfortunately.
And I mean, I've taken train trips in quite a few countries in Europe, in China itself, and there is huge differences in those experiences. I've certainly found that Europe seems to be a lot more organized than China as well with its rail and the comfortability. The journeys tend to be a lot faster because they are the hyperspeed. But nonetheless, whenever you go to other countries, the challenge is being able to figure out which train to take and then how to pay for that train. And it's the digital ticketing aspect, which is perhaps one of the challenges for accessibility. What changes are being made there within that infrastructure to make tickets more accessible to travelers?
So there is a notion that railway companies, some are hard to work with, some are less hard to work with. My analogy for that is politics. There is right wing and left wing. So there is people who are more protective of their business and people who are more welcoming competition. The more welcoming competition would be Sweden, where they just announced that they're closing their shops inside the railway station, going full force on digitalization of tickets. And then you can have SNCF, which instead of welcoming more competition, decided to buy ancient vending machine and putting them inside tobacco shops in France. Now, I understand the short-term view in terms of SNCF. They might win another few percentage of sales, but long-term, this machine will get kicked by people until they're broken because they will be like payphones.
I mean, that's an interesting thing, and the fact that you still have to go to a vending machine to get tickets, paper tickets,
and get Corona. People would not want to touch something else, unless you have to. You see it already on elevators. This is, like you see a giant sticking to his old habits. Again, I understand his view of things, but as a government owned, his view of things should not affect the global view. He doesn't own the business. It's not for money, it's for government, for people.
And I mean, is this because they're trying to maintain control, independence, almost a monopoly over the particular market? I mean, if you look at the UK, it's a complex mess of many different types of rail providers, which has taken quite a while to bring them all together so that you can buy a ticket from one single platform rather than having to go independently to different providers. Now, that's one of the things that's also happening, isn't it? The trend now, a bit like, flights, or you'd be able to book a flight from anywhere to anywhere through a centralized meta search provider. This is now happening within the railway network. So people who are looking at going from Paris to Brussels, or from Berlin to Warsaw or whatever, they're able now to make those journeys by trains and be able to get a ticket from A to B without having to go through to multiple providers.
So any meta search in the world who shows trains uses our technology. Okay, I say it at 100% confidence. The reason why is that Amadeus and Silverwhale just simply didn't work the right way to fix the problem. They tried. You have to give it to them. They tried. They failed, but they tried. And you had to probably come up with the Israeli entrepreneurship way, that if the door is locked, you either break the door or get through the window. You don't accept the things as they are. This is the Israeli entrepreneurship. And now it's actually global. It's global, whether it's Berlin startups or UK startup, which is progressing amazingly, or San Francisco, New York, Austin, Atlanta, anywhere in the world. This is the way. You don't accept what has worked and is not good. You don't accept it. Now, going into the UK, interesting that you mentioned it, because the UK is amazed of monopolies. Because on the same track, very rarely two different operators run on it. However, the UK has a very they have an option to change it because the government owns the tracks. Okay, it's not always the place, like in Japan, for example. It's not like that, where they also have multiple operators, but each operator owns its own tracks. So it's a different issue. But I'm just mentioning it because it's very important to still remember that railway companies are heterogeneous. There isn't one which is the same. It's like a sand in the sea. It's like humans, even twins are not the same. There isn't one rail.
You are making it sound like you have just conquered a mountain with what you've been able to do to bring all these different providers together. So my question to you is, how did you do it? With all these complexities in place, how did you bring it all together?
Very little sleep, and I didn't bring all together, not yet. I'm bringing as we speak. Russia is coming up, Canada is coming up, Japan is coming up. However, when everybody else worked as a proxy for the railway, we looked at it from a cloud perspective, where we created a second layer of full tech for rail, where we standardized everything that we get from the feed of the railway, in order to make it, like you mentioned, really clear for meta search to show it alongside air.
Now that's great, because I mean, that is really taking a proper digital view at something that's been done and not replicating how it's done, but making it relevant for the digital platforms. And that's something that you've seen other companies fail at doing. They've sort of they've created an identical process to how it's always done before, and they've run into friction. They've run into many barriers. But it sounds like for you, creating a unique standardized cloud platform has enabled you to be much more responsive to every individual train operator's requirements.
So I'll tell you something. Good things takes time. I'll tell you a little personal story. So my dad is a partner in the company. He's a successful entrepreneur on his own, sold to companies, etc., etc. 1 or 2 years ago, he met an investment banker who knew him for many, many years, and he asked him, "How come you don't have sufficient sales in this company?" And this goes into the notion. You think that we are 5 years that we did well, so people are investment bankers or VCs look at the company who doesn't generate enough revenue in 3 years as a failure. But each market has its own. Like, I've just saw a SPAC vehicle buying an autonomous startup in Israel. They generated last year 250K. They got a ridiculous valuation of 1.4 billion. Now, I'm saying ridiculous because as a retail investor like you, that's what they call personal people buying stock where they're not institutional. We see it as a joke. But eventually, a valuation is someone else willing to buy an asset for that valuation. So you essentially need only one person.
It's crazy, certainly the valuation that can be put on things today, and how technology has certainly stoked that. Now, talk about your vision then. What is your vision? What are you trying to achieve?
So I'm actually following the footsteps of governments at this point, because we do two things. We do development and we do product well. That's what at least we believe they do, and at least the client shows with their foods that we do, food, sorry. Anyways, so we follow governments. Now our next big product mapping, you can say, is the US. People like to say the US is Amtrak. It's not. So there are over 15 different railway companies in the US, some original, okay? However, that transport more than 1 million people every month. That's a very decent amount. If you look at yesterday, I think, publishment that Renfe is buying 50% stake at Leo Express, and you see the amount of people Leo Express transported last year, or like let's consider 2019 as a better example. They're only in the millions, but they're still a very good company, running very well, profitable, etc. So in the US, if you want to make a holistic rail journey in the US, you have to connect 15 different railway operators who have different systems. You have to match the data. You have to find the sweet spots. You have to find geolocation data. You have to see a timetable, because some railway operators operate as a metro scheme. Like, for example, take Belgium. Belgian pricing are not dynamic. So that's when I say metro scheme. So regional trains in the US sometimes have state mandate where the pricing has to be fixed. So they're not like in the UK where it's dynamically, okay? So you have to work, and when it's fixed, you know that the timetable is also fixed, okay? And then you have to match everything all together. That's the complexity here. Now, going to someone, I always say it, you don't get to study rail in Ivy League. As far as I know, there are two good universities in the world who teaches about rail. One is in Delft, and the other one is Shanghai. Actually, I think there's another one in Indiana or Colorado, but it's pretty new.
So, I mean, at the moment, I guess it sounds like there's, unless you're doing an apprenticeship through a rail company, there's very little innovation that is potentially happening in that space.
But if you go and do apprenticeship at a railway company, your magnifier becomes very narrow, because then you start to look at things the way they see it. Look at DB Digital Venture, okay? That's the venture capital arm of Deutsche Bank. Unfortunately, they tarnished a lot of the personal wealth of the people of Germany into the ground. Now, they weren't successful. You know what? If you're successful at something, do it a lot, okay? Do it and replicate it. They're good in rail on the operation side. However, not DB Mindbox, which is the accelerator, and not DB Digital Ventures invested in a single railway startup, whether it's freight, whether it's doors, whether it's I don't know, anything that has technology. And there's like several different good startups in the world. They didn't invest in anyone. Like even Rail Vision, an Israeli successful startup that is doing. They're predicting if how long it's gonna take the rail to stop, or they're checking if there's things on the rail, and it's amazing. It's like a Mobileye for rail. Very interesting startup, but eventually, who invested in them? The great guys of Knorr-Bremse, guys who weren't educated in the rail sector, build an amazing business. They have very close to monopoly. I walk on thin ice because I like them in the door sector and the stepper of rail. And they're doing something well. And you know what? They saw synergies. They pressed on the gas. They invested in Rail Vision. But you know what? Also, NS, which I'm very, very good friends with them. Okay, they have an investment arm that the logistic company of the Netherlands invested. The port government of invested. NS invested as well. It's called Mainport Innovation. However, it runs by a guy that doesn't understand rail as well.
Right. Okay. So that's going to bring some friction around the innovation side of things. But sometimes, I guess, not knowing how an industry works or not knowing how the infrastructure is put together allows you to have a new perspective on things, does it not? Allows you to challenge the status quo? Or do you find that people are just sheep and they just follow what's already been done?
So younger generation don't accept it. Let me give you an example from the financial side. Wall Street Bets. Wall Street Bets is what you've heard. It's a Reddit thread that keeps updating by young generation about what companies to buy in order to kill the short position of the hedge funds. So people don't accept it that hedge funds gets the majority of the wealth in the financial sector. They're challenging it. Now, in the past, at least when it beginning, the hedge fund said, no, it's like the wind. It will go within a week. And then the younger generation make a buck. They short squeeze some of the largest hedge funds in the world. They actually caused a $3 billion damage to one large fund. Okay. I won't say damage because they are allowed to buy whatever they want. Okay. So younger generation don't accept the status quo. And they're super smart. If you combine my brain and yours, they're more smarter than that.
Yeah, and I mean, all the studying they have to do, they've had to do a lot more than we've had to, even just to leave school nowadays. So looking at travel providers, how can they consider integrating rail as part of their offering, for consumer travel journeys or for business and corporate travel?
So interestingly enough, the travel companies who were interested in rail in the past looked at it as ancillary product. This dynamic has totally changed. So you have organizations such as Kayak, which wants to go into being carbon zero. They want, although they make money out of flights, they care about society more than they care about money. I genuinely believe that. I had numerous calls with the people there. I genuinely believe in their cause. I genuinely believe, okay? And I'm very cautious about people whom I trust, at least at this point of my time in life. I'm not an 18 years old who trusts anyone. I can see this is their goal to move into more greener transportation. And what can you do? Even scooter are not as green as rail. And this dynamic is not going to change. And it makes me so funny to see posts on LinkedIn by JetBlue Digital Ventures talking about carbon-friendly transportation, how they're making the cups paper instead of plastic. You know what? It doesn't matter. Air is going to stay here for a very long time or indefinite. However, rail would be the most polluting transport on Earth. It is what it is. And it's not going to change. Having an airline talking about carbon pollution, it's like asking a dog to speak Hebrew.
But as you
Better.
say, now there's more opportunity for travel providers with these direct connection to these sales platforms to be able to buy tickets, or at least consumers, if they have a choice to travel by rail, that it's easier for travel providers to be able to arrange that for them.
So that's what we've built. We are the underlying technology provider to allow them to have the comparison between flights and rail. The rail infrastructure on the side of the software, okay, they're very lacking. Surprisingly enough, the railway company who is doing the most problems in the world, actually, to third-party partners, they have the most successful software side. That's SNCF. I have to be like, I'm very direct person, but I'm very honest. As much as they're making problems on the software side, they're good. However, all the rest, they're very good on operation, but they're lacking on the software. Again, some people might disagree with me, but I think that I know rail slightly better than anyone else. Okay, leave arrogancy aside. I traveled a lot in rail, so on the consumer side, I'm on par with you. But on the side of understanding how the business operates, very few people talked and worked with many railways in the world.
I mean, you can definitely see the face of rail travel changing now that tickets are more accessible digitally. Certainly, even for someone like me, being able to go to an app and being able to get a ticket instantly and that be available on my phone. Obviously, as you say, it's some of the physical infrastructure of having the right right readers that can electronic readers that can actually read these tickets, because obviously they've had to replace the old ticket slots that you used to put through in replacement for these scanners. So I guess once that's made a lot more momentum and people are more used to purchasing tickets like that, hopefully we'll see that more accessible.
That's what meta search and travel providers are trying. They're trying to make it more accessible.
Yeah.
Again, also developing software is not a one-day job. The rail sector is different than the air sector. Air sector, I look at it, although now it's easy to look at it, but I look at it as a piece of cake. You have 7,300 airports in the world. Worst comes to worst, you get another 5 airports. That's it. But that's it. You have what you have. And each of them is 3 letters. That's the standardization. Rail sector, you don't have standardization. You have different codes from different countries, whether UIC, Ben, and numeric, not number, Japanese, etc. Number of kilometers from the next close city. It's actually the name of the station. So there's so much to do. It's not like an airport, like Zavatim Airport, Luton Airport, Heathrow Airport. Unless a very huge philanthropic guy comes and invests in that airport, or ask for his name, their airport name would stay his name.
Yeah, so as you say, it's much easier for airports. A lot to do on the train front, and any other thoughts that you'd like to share with us today regarding sort of like train travel and how the industry can embrace this more?
If you haven't train travel, do it. That's what I'm saying, okay? Because it's simply a different experience. The one thing that you will fall in love with is that you won't hear sit down and buckle up and wait for takeoff.
No, indeed. It's
secondly,
something that
you don't. As soon as you're out of the gate, you actually started traveling. Secondly, you get to see nature from the same level as where you sit. You don't get to see the Alps from above as much as it's very nice to see. Switzerland from down below is much more prettier than from above. And you start the travel. So, like take myself, when I could travel to a ski holiday, It would take 12 hours from the time that I left my home until I reached the actual ski resort. Okay, but when you start to travel train, the minute you step on the train, probably 20 minutes after you started your holiday, you don't get people saying you show
Yeah.
me passport when you're on the train. Sometimes you get to show it when you cross country before you actually travel. But you sit down, you relax, you don't have to buckle up. You want to go get food, you get food. You want to read, you can read. You want to sleep, you can sleep. More that you have more place for your legs. The chairs are much more comfortable. You don't have budget airlines telling you get more closer to each other so they can have more people on the airplane. On rail, if there's a lot of people traveling, you simply get more wagons. This is what China is doing. Actually, some railways in Europe doing it as well. You can see a rail for the next, let's say, 15 days forward. You don't have a ticket today. Try tomorrow, you will have a ticket because they added extra wagons. But 737 of an LCC, which is low cost airlines, indefinitely would have 192 people on board. That's it. It's fixed.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of it as well. And certainly from my experiences of traveling by train, you get a bit more of an idea of the local culture. You're traveling with people who are going just a few stops. You can experience, as you say, a lot more of the country because you're at ground level, and the comfort of being able to get up and walk around without being strapped in the whole time. Udi, that was lovely. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to talk to us today and give us the insights into the rail sector.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that was Udi Sharir, founder and CEO of Save a Train. Thanks for listening to travelmarket.live. Find more episodes on the website and through our podcast station, which you can find on any of the podcast platforms, Travel Market Life. My name's Ryan Haynes. Speak to you soon. Thanks very much. Ciao for now.